My name is Peter, and today in this video I'm going to show you all around this NX, which is a quite interesting proposition from Lexus because it's a bit smaller than the RZ that we drove in the previous video, but a lot bigger than the LBX that we drove earlier in the year. This is a typical Lexus face, starting here on the front, a typical classic Lexus grille, very much tying in with the modern design language that Lexus is having. Nice daytime running lights. Remember this shape because we'll see it in the back as well, with LED headlights, obviously. This is the Overtrail pack, which you can see with some accents here and a bit more of a rugged, active lifestyle design, so you will. More on the exact versions and such later in the video. But this Overtrail version gives you a few extra things, one of which is a bit more ground clearance here, about 1.5 centimeters more ground clearance than your standard NX. And also you get all-terrain tires with this version as standard. So not all-season tires, but all-terrain tires. Because this is the all-wheel drive version as well, which means it is really aimed at the active lifestyle, and you can take a few forest trails and sandy roads with this as well. I quite like the fact that this has black wheels and then all these black accents against this moon desert paint. I don't know if it comes across on camera, but it's a bit of a greenish, brownish version. It doesn't sound like much, but in real life it looks really cool. I quite like it. And especially with these black accents here, I think it looks pretty cool. And also this sort of gunmetal framing around the windows and the black roof rail. It is a good looking car as far as I'm concerned. I already mentioned it's slightly smaller than the RZ, that is the full size SUV, but you can see standing in front of it with 4.60 meters and a bit. It is not a small car, but obviously that little bit of extra length, you mainly notice it on the inside, which we'll see later. Walking around the car, we got the charging port right here, because this is a plug-in hybrid. So you can do part of your journey electric, which is quite nice. But as you can see by the plug, there is no fast charging available, unfortunately. 18 and a bit kilowatt hour battery. So that's actually quite good for your range, but it only charges at 6 and a bit kilowatts per hour. So that is not much, and that means you can't plug it in at your builder's market or at the supermarket for a quick top up. You're always going to have to charge this for longer periods of time, which is a bit of a letdown because it's not a cheap vehicle. And fast charging, even if it's only a little bit, would be much appreciated. Coming to the back of the car, I told you to remember the shape of the daytime running lights. This is the reverse shape for the rear lights. I think it looks quite handsome, especially with this continuous light bar across the whole width of the back. I think that looks quite good. It's a nice piece of design. You can see that the rear window is also quite upright, which is also good because it means you get your actual wiper, which is nice, and you get a good view out that way, so that is great. Opening the boot, 520 liters of boot capacity, so that is very, very usable. You can see I got the charging cable in here for scale. 520 liters basically is all you need, but since this is a car aimed for an active lifestyle, this is also plenty of space to throw all your gear in, whatever it might be. And especially when you fold the seats down, obviously you got about 1,000 liters of extra space. Mountain bikes, canoes, anything, surfboards will fit in here, as long as the length is fine. When you do want to fold the seats down, we got the Lexus cover here, which comes off. And then when you undo it, you can fold it up, which is super handy. Now clearly this is fabric, so it is not as solid as a fixed shelf, and it will obviously leave a bit of sound deadening to be desired, but it's super practical and super small this way, so you can just tuck this away somewhere in the car and it's out of the way. You don't have to bother with it, so that is actually quite nice. There's a few hooks and tie-down points obviously in the boot, and if you go under the included rubber mat, there's also a little bit of extra storage here for your cables and such. And if you go further back, there's some emergency kits and everything, so all is well here. Finishing up the tour around the car, here you have your fuel filler cap, because like I said, it's a plug-in hybrid, so once you run out of electricity, you can still use the petrol engine. And this being four-wheel drive, you can be quite flexible in how you deploy that power, so that's also quite nice. I think all around it's a good looking car. It's a nice size. I quite like the form factor here, being slightly smaller than the RZ like I already mentioned, but still almost a full-size SUV, so that's very usable for people and things. And especially this Overtrail version with the roof rack and everything. Yeah, I kind of like the idea of being able to go anywhere, anytime, apart from any kind of serious off-roading. So it is a cool proposition here in this Overtrail version. Time for a tour around the cockpit of this Lexus NX. And if you've seen previous videos, then this is a very familiar cockpit. There's really nothing too crazy different here, apart from a few details. So let's start here on the side. We have a little wood inlay here. Not really sure why, because it's only here and on the passenger door and nowhere else. So it's not in the middle or anywhere else in the dashboard. So not really sure why that is. But it fits sort of the theme of the car, I suppose. Same thing with the colors, actually, from the color scheme inside here. It's pretty dark with this black and this greenish brown, but it fits the outside really well. So that's actually quite nice. Over here we have some seat controls, which is a sort of logical place, maybe. Over here we have the seat memory function, which I'm not really sure why this is up here and not on the seat itself, but okay. And we have the trip computer here behind the steering wheel as well, which is a bit of an odd choice. I also said that in the RZ video. I'm not really sure why this is over here, but you know, that's where your button is. We have traditional buttons here also for the windows and for the mirrors, so that is cool. I appreciate that. No swipey, touchy thingies over there. That's absolutely not necessary. It is a touchy thingy here with the button for the door. You press it and it opens. And the manual override, just like in the Lexus RZ, is in the actual button. So you can also pull this twice to open the door as well. So that's your emergency override right there. Actually quite nice that it's not hidden away somewhere here in the door pocket, but just integrated with the button. Good job, Lexus there. In front of me, I got a driver's display, which is about this big, but the actual display is only this big. So the rest is only warning lights, and you permanently have your fuel gauge and your battery gauge on the sides. It doesn't really look that nice because you always have that square in the middle that you can clearly see. So it's not super nice, but it is very functional. You can put all the information you want there. There's a few different dials you can actually choose. So it is very functional, although I also said in the RZ video, it's very busy. There's a lot of symbols and things going on, especially with this hybrid system. So that is something to get used to. Something else that I haven't gotten used to is the buttons on the steering wheel. It is a normal traditional Lexus steering wheel, same as in the other models, with your stalks behind and your paddles here. But the touchy joypads here on the steering wheel, I'm not friends with those. It is something that you operate on your head-up display. So if you want to change tracks for your radio, for example, you have to touch it first until your head-up display lights up, and then you can press the button. And it's just too cumbersome because if you quickly want to change tracks or quickly want to change stations and you just tap it once because you remember where you left it, then it doesn't work and you have to touch it first until it lights up and then it does. It's too cumbersome and I don't like it. I didn't like it in the other models. I don't like it here either. The steering wheel itself though is nice, heated of course. The seats are heated and everything as well. So it is a comfortable driving position. Something to get used to is that the car is quite large in itself obviously, but the dashboard is quite deep as well until you reach the window, and then the bonnet is quite long as well. So despite the fact that you sit a bit higher, because it's an SUV obviously, you have to get used, especially in the beginning, that there's quite a lot of car in front of you. Which you get used to reasonably quickly, especially with all the driver aids and all the parking sensors and cameras and everything. So it's fine, but it is something to note. If we follow the circle through the cabin, a big screen in the middle, typical Lexus screen that we also saw in the other model, super responsive. All your stuff is here, all your settings are here. It is not the last word in graphic design, but it is all extremely functional. So, you know, it works and it's all very manageable and very workable, especially because it works so fast. It is actually quite nice. You got some manual controls here for your temperature, and as we also saw in the RZ video, this is not an extra screen. This is just the corner of this screen that they put the circle on for the temperature. So funny solution there, but it is very functional and nice that there's a physical dial. Same thing for the volume, physical dial for that here is always appreciated, but it's kind of weird that you still have a slider here for your air speed. But okay, it works. There's also some buttons here for your self-parking and your camera views, so that is cool too. Interesting thing with the camera view is when you click on it and you go to the settings, you can actually pick the color of the car. If you've seen early videos of us, you can sometimes hear me complain about the fact that the car color in the infotainment screen is different than the actual car that you have. This is, I would say, a pretty good solution from Lexus, that you can at least pick your own color of your car. So that is actually quite nice, and then it matches up. It's a pet peeve of mine. So that is cool. If we move further down, you can see a giant knob here for your driving modes. Quite nice that you can operate this manually properly with gloves on as well, because this is in the end an active lifestyle vehicle. So you can go from Sport S to Sport Plus to normal to custom, and you can even go to eco mode. So that's actually quite nice that you can play around with these driving modes a little bit in order to adapt the hybrid system to whatever you're doing. That hybrid system has further adjustments back down here. You can see, first of all, the off-road button. So when you do attack some kind of trail, you can press that and you get the most out of your all-wheel drive system. In daily life, you'll probably use this auto button most because then the car figures it out for you. And you have a button that you can press for charging the car. So this car can act as its own generator and actually charge the battery for you. So you don't always have to plug it in. For example, if you're driving around, you realize you're entering an environment zone, you can do a little bit of charging beforehand to make sure you always have enough battery. So you can play around with the hybrid system here a little bit and to make sure that it suits the needs that you might have at a certain time. So it's actually quite nice that Lexus gives you the flexibility to do that. Finishing up, here in the middle, obviously we have our drive selector. We have some cup holders here that are not really suitable for small bottles, as you can see, but they are somewhat adaptive for your bigger bottles. We got a charging pad here, taking the key out, and that is actually quite nice for your inductive charging, so that's cool. A little cubby here that is pretty useless. I don't really know what you put in here. Maybe your phone can go like that. No, it doesn't even. So not really sure what that's for, but you got a USB-C here and a USB-A to connect to the system. So that's nice, and if you need even more charging, you can actually slide this away. And then you got two more USB-Cs and your 12-volt socket there to charge. And this is lined with felt, so nothing will rattle around. So that's good, good solution, and actually nice use of the space here, because there is a lot of space down there, and this is a very functional way of using it. Then we have the armrest, nice and broad, very comfortable, and it can open two ways for all your car stuff. So that's also quite nice. Up here we have a sunglass holder, which is always handy, although it is not very big. So if you have anything huge, it doesn't fit there, but it is also lined in felt to not scratch your lenses. And we have a panoramic roof, as you can see, and that can obviously also open with a button, just like that. So that is everything you want from your panoramic roof option. This being quite the dark interior, this is, I wouldn't say a must, but it really makes a difference. Especially with a dark interior, you get a sort of sense of claustrophobia quite quickly. And this just gives you so much extra light, and it lights up the whole interior. For reference, I can actually show you how dark it gets when you close the cover. It's quite a fast cover, actually. You can see how quickly it gets dark in here. So that really makes a difference. If you have a dark interior, the panoramic roof is definitely the way to go. So obviously we got to take you for a little drive in this Lexus NX 450h Plus all-wheel drive, which is a whole mouthful. We are a plug-in hybrid, so we have a combined system output, in this case of 309 horsepower. With 180 and a bit from the engine, another 180 and a bit from the electric drivetrain, which you can't add up completely, but according to Lexus, it ends up at 300 and a bit horsepower, which is a nice amount of power for a car that weighs 2 tons and a car that is this size. We're getting on to the highway right now, and it is by no means a super fast car, but it is a nice, quick enough car with that power under your right foot. Yielding, exits, overtaking, all that stuff. It's just nice. Nice to have that little bit of extra power under your foot. I often say it in these reviews, like you don't need 500, 600 horsepower. It's just not necessary. But under 200, it's a bit compromised. It's not undoable, it's not unlivable, but it's just nicer for the driving experience to have that little bit of extra power. At 300 is an excellent sweet spot in terms of power delivery, usability, and still some fuel economy. So this being a plug-in hybrid, all the usual benefits of plug-in hybrid driving are valid for this car as well. So with 18 and a bit kilowatt hours of battery, you're realistically looking at 70-ish kilometers of electric range, which is fine for your daily commute, to and from work, for taking your kids to school, driving the sports and all those kind of things. more than adequate. So that's nice. The downside is that 6 and a bit kilowatt hour charging, which is just not enough. It is a bit of a downer that you can't fast charge and just top up quickly when you're doing groceries or when you're at the hardware store. It's not necessary anymore, I think, in this day and age to not have fast charging. And it doesn't have to be 9 million watts of fast charging or anything, but just enough to top off in 20 minutes, that would have been great. Because now you're always looking at a 3-hour charge overnight, which is not an issue, but it is just more convenient to be able to charge quickly. Luckily, you can also let the car do the charging for you, because the engine also works as a generator. So if you are looking low on range as far as battery goes, but you still need to get into an environment zone, or if you want to drive home electrically, then you can let the car charge itself, which is a nice feature actually, that is available. That also means that you can play with the hybrid system a little bit and get the performance when you want it from the drivetrain. Obviously, we have to have a look at the back seats of this Lexus NX. I already mentioned it is slightly smaller than the RZ. Not much, but it is something that you notice here on the inside, especially in the back, because those centimeters have to come from somewhere, and you notice there's slightly less room available back here compared to the RZ, because it's a smaller car. But that said, I am 183 and about 90 kilos, and you can see that I have plenty of knee room available here. The seats are also soft in the back, so no issues if you would touch the seat with your knees. It is actually quite comfortable. Part of that comfort also comes from the fact that there's plenty of room for my feet. So I have a lot of space under the seat here, which is nice. And also the almost lack of a transmission tunnel here is also nice for that extra little bit of space for your feet if necessary. And obviously you can put a bag or anything else down here as well. The materials here in the back are excellent, pretty much on par with what you get in the front, so that is always nice. One of the first things that you can save money on as a manufacturer is to have less quality materials the further down you go. But that's not the case here. It's all actually quite nice. The same bit of wood here on the door as on the front. So really the only spots where that wood is present in the car. And the same button here for the door, and all the same colors and materials as well. Now you can see that the window is not particularly large, and that the window line is all the way up to my shoulder. Not an issue for me, but you can imagine children who are a lot shorter are looking into the interior of the car. So that is something to take into account. The panoramic roof counters that with plenty of light coming in. But if you don't have the roof, and this is the only bit of window that you get as a passenger, that might be a concern for people with kids. The same goes for the seat. It's not particularly massive, but obviously children sitting lower, they do look at the shoulder of the seat a little bit, but there's plenty of sort of light coming in from the front, so you have a good overview as a rear passenger of what's happening, and you don't have to be too much sort of searching and looking around the seats to see what's happening in the front. So that is actually quite nice. That gives you a nice sense of air and space back here, even if you won't have a panoramic roof. But as I said in the front, the roof really contributes here with this darker interior to have a nice airy feel. There's a few nice features back here. We got some vent controls here, but no temperature control, just airspeed and air direction. And down here we have a 12-volt socket and 2 USBs behind a little flap. So that's great. Like I said, almost no transmission tunnel at least, so that is also excellent for the comfort back here. And if I move to the middle seat, it is not high, so it's the same level as the other seats, so that's actually good. And it's also not hard. It's actually, relatively comfortable even for somebody my size. And I can sit here thanks to the knee room and thanks to the space for my feet. I can also sit here for slightly longer journeys. So that is actually quite good. The only thing is that the headroom, there's only this much left. So that is not optimal, but also not an issue for 183 at least. So if you're taller than 183, you're going to be hitting the roof here. Last but not least, the armrest in the middle has a little pull tag. Very simple, nothing really going wrong here, except the fact that you're always in the cup holder with your wrist or with your hand. So that is not ideal. And when you have a bottle here, then you're always hitting that with your arm. So that is not ideal. I prefer to have it here in front coming out of the armrest. But this is fine. No ski hatch here or anything, so that is something you have to live with. And other than that, all is well back here. Last but not least, obviously this is a size of a car that works for people with families, with kids. If you have small kids and you still need to use child seats, the ISOFIX points are down here. No covers or flaps or anything, just in between the seats, which is nice and convenient, but that does mean that stuff can roll in here and get stuck there. So that is something to note. So obviously this Lexus NX comes in several flavors. I got the price list here. It's quite a long list, so I'll put most of it on the screen for you. But you basically have the 350h with 240 horsepower coming in a two-wheel or four-wheel drive version. That starts with the Comfort Line two-wheel drive, starts at just under 62,000 euros here in the Netherlands. And it goes all the way up to 78,500 euro for the President Line. The all-wheel drive version, also with the 240 horsepower drivetrain, starts with the luxury line just under 72,000 here in the Netherlands and goes all the way up to the President Line for 81,500 euro. This version where we're in at the moment is the 450h Plus plug-in hybrid all-wheel drive, whole mouthful. This one starts with the luxury line at just under 66,000 here in the Netherlands. Executive line for 73. The Overtrail that we're in starts at 73.5. Then the F-Sport above this one is 75, and the President Line, top of the line with everything in it, starts at 75,500 euro. Then we have this version specifically, that is the 73,500 euro starting price, but this has the panoramic roof, which is a 1,500 euro option, and the premium pack for 1,600 euro extra. The paint is included for a total of 76,746 euro for this version as it stands here. The car itself is actually quite a pleasant thing to drive, being slightly smaller than the RZ that I referred to a few times already. It just gives you that little bit of extra flexibility in terms of maneuvering. It's not that the car is unmaneuverable when it gets a little bit bigger, but with 4.60 m and a bit, it's just nicer to be in parking garages and so on, where you think, oh, it fits quite easily, and it's just a little bit of less attention you have to pay to the size of the car. The car itself offers you a lot of options, with the rear seats being quite spacious, with the big 500 plus liter boot. You can actually do quite a lot of things with this car, which is nice. That means it's very versatile in its deployment. This Overtrail version in particular gives you that little bit of extra ground clearance, like I mentioned, and it gives you those all-terrain tires as standard. I'm not 100% sure that that's worth it, because let's face it, even if you have the most active lifestyle, you'll spend most of your time on normal roads, on normal highways, and on normal streets. And I'm not sure if it's worth the compromise with the little bit of extra sound, a little bit of less grip, and a little bit of extra vibrations, for example, that you get from these tires. That you want to compromise 90% of your driving with the 10% of trail driving that you might do in the weekend. At the same time, I do get the feeling that you might want to get from this car when you do have such an active lifestyle and you go canoeing every weekend and mountain biking with your kids during the week and all those things. I can see that this might make sense in this setup, but you have to see if that fits your lifestyle depending on what you do and where you live, of course, because I live in a suburb here in the Netherlands, so for me that is a lot less relevant, and I would personally go for a normal tired version of this NX. Now, I mentioned the 309 horsepower. Of that, 54 horsepower is available for the rear axle. That is your second electric motor. It's an electric four-wheel drive system. That is not permanent, but only comes in when slip is detected or when the situation so required. So when you put it in off-road mode or all-terrain mode, then obviously it starts to work for you. Is that enough to do any serious off-roading? Probably not, even though horsepower in itself is a lot less relevant when it comes to off-roading. But this is not a full off-road car. I think if you are into hardcore desert driving or mountaintop climbing, this is not the car for you. But it does give you that little bit of extra ability when you do go on some kind of trail, or when you do have to take your canoe to the lake and have to go off-road a little bit. It's nice to have that option. It is also nice that you can play with the hybrid system in that sense, that you can pick and choose when you want your power delivery from a certain part of the drivetrain. So overall, I think that's quite a complete setup from Lexus, and it's also quite nice that you as the user have so much ability and variability of how you deploy the power. Driving is nice with this kind of power, and it's also the same benefits, like I mentioned, that you have with any plug-in hybrid. I really like that concept that you can drive electrically in and around your house, do the school run electric, and then still have the option for longer range if you want it. And I think that's the same for this car. The package is very complete as far as that goes in terms of flexibility of your deployment. After a week with this Lexus NX, what can I make of it? It's an awesome proposition, I think, in what it is. It's a vehicle that has a lot of flexibility in terms of capability, luxury, size, storage space, and basically anything else, which is nice and flexible. It's a vehicle and a platform that offers you a lot of options, which I think is a really strong proposition from Lexus. This Overtrail version specifically, I don't think it's worth the compromise over a normal version. I think if you want all the luxury and all the toys, I would go for the F Sport line. Looks just as cool, and you have all the benefits, but you don't have the downsides of, for example, those all-terrain tires. If it really fits your lifestyle though, and if you can really justify it, by all means go for it, because I think it looks cool, and that sort of extra off-road ability is nice to have. But I think for everybody else, a normal version would be better. Well over 70,000 euros is a lot of money. But if you like the brand, if you like the luxury, and if you like the refinement that Lexus offers in this package, I think that is maybe justifiable, even though for that money there's also quite a lot of other cars you can get. Overall though, I think it's a great proposition from Lexus. I think it's a very nice platform, and it's a nice car that fits basically any situation that you might throw at it, depending on which pack you pick. That's all I got for you in this video. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it, subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss any of our videos, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Cheers!